Well, the first thing that happened was that shortly after Freddie's death, they got the cocktail right. So people with HIV were not living under a death sentence anymore, provided they had money. You know, that's the big thing. So if Freddie had begun to suffer about a year later, he probably still would have been with us. That's the most enormous change, I suppose. But of course, it hasn't affected millions of people who were affected by HIV in other countries, like Africa, in the poor countries. In this country, you know, I guess people think that it's all over and it's all sorted, but in fact, you know, there are a lot of people walking around with AIDS, and that unfortunately there's a bit of a drift, because once things quieten down, people think there's no need to worry anymore. So we still work on awareness in this country, but of course it applies more in many other countries around the world. If you're in a rich country, then the prognosis is very good. But it's wiped out a whole generation in Africa, and is still absolutely rife. And one of the things that the MPT, the Mercury Phoenix Trust, works on is awareness still. You know, awareness is still top of our list. Awareness and education of what you can do to minimise the spread of the disease, and it comes down to very simple things like condoms and various, and actually counteracting some of the traditional sexual mores that happen in certain parts of the world. So a lot of the stuff we fund, and I think we're the only people who do it more or less, we fund things like education projects, plays. People put on a play to educate the local, you know, some remote community in Africa or Mozambique or whatever. A little play which will tell people what is actually going on and what they can do to protect themselves, and tell women what they can expect their rights to be and what they don't have to say yes to. So we work in a number of very, very small ways, but they add up to quite a big change in attitude in some cases. Well, I suppose that there's an incredible fear of the unknown, isn't there? You know, suddenly there's this thing which is walking the earth, and nobody knows where it's come from and who it's going to strike next. And in the gay community, it was absolutely horrific, of course. And you had this terrible stigma thing. I mean, there were people saying, oh, you know, this is what the gay community deserves, and so the most horrific things were being said, you know, almost like, you know, this is a scourge that was sent to punish people. You know, this is the sort of ignorance that was the climate at the time, and it was actually quite a big thing to even start off the Mercury Phoenix Trust at that point, you know, and quite brave of Freddie in his hour of, well, realising that he was slipping away. It had been very difficult for him to even announce what he was suffering from, but at that point he did. And he said, you know, I don't want people to think that I died of something else. I died of AIDS, and this is what it is. And it's time for us all to gather together and realise what it is we're facing, and the whole of humanity is facing this.
How do you feel about the fact that 20 years on, stigma is still something that's mentioned by people who have HIV?
It's amazing, but stigma does still exist, yes, in spite of all the education, in spite of, you know, all of us should know better. Yes, it's still there, and it's down to awareness, and it's down to understanding and clearing away the ignorance, really.